Howdy, guys. Attorney Walter. We're going to be going to something that has been splashed all over the classic legacy news channels. We've seen basically Senator Rick Scott try to get away from it, trying to reevaluate, rephrase, reshape exactly what he wanted to go ahead and say when he released his 11-point plan to rescue America. We're going to be going into essentially what he was saying about the sunset ideology when it comes to Social Security. And you're going to realize that all of these news media channels were full of bleep. Literally, they came up with their own little agenda so that they could sell news time, minutes on the TV to go ahead and basically have advertisements push. But we're going to go through specifically what this means, what the sunset ideology was, and essentially why. When I looked into it, I was just like, "Give me a break! Give me a break!" Bottom line was I got a call from somebody who was very upset, felt that I was not giving Biden a fair shake in some of my prior videos. President Biden is the current sitting president. I would like to say, if you are the current sitting president, I am allowed to go ahead and critique your abilities, specifically when it comes to things that are at issue. For example, the economy. It is the worst it's ever been since I've been alive. Since I was born, it's never been this bad. Number two, increase to benefits. A lot of promises were made. Very few of them. I think one, which was it was just like a low-hanging fruit thing. One was actually completed. All the other ones were not even really attempted. There were bills put in House, Senate. None of them got out of that. None of them are out of committee to increase SSI benefits, increase SSDI benefits, at least create a baseline for retired people so that people that are getting $300 a month that are retired actually have a baseline. Howdy, Annette. So the point is, if I seem like I get on Biden's case a little bit, I'm a U.S. citizen. Biden works for me. That's the bottom line. I am a U.S. citizen. President Biden works for me. His job is to make me happy. His job is to make you guys happy. If you guys feel that your money is not going very far and the benefits should be more, guess what? You are correct. If you feel that the person at the top of the totem pole when it comes to government-based policy creation and ... actually putting it in place, that would be President Biden. So if you feel that I was a little bit too harsh on him, I squarely look you in the face and say I don't think so. I would be just as hard on Trump for all these things, maybe even harder, because frankly, I expect more from Trump. At this point, I would have expected more from him. I would have seen more from him. There would have been more done by him. And just as a side note, before we even get into the Rick Scott detail, how many of you guys at this point have a clear understanding of what President Biden's plan is to fix the economy? How many of you have a clear understanding as to what President Biden's plan is to put in action those things that he promised pre-White House? Right? There was a big sheet. I read it to you guys. How many of you guys can tell me what the plan actually is? And I'll just share with you. There is no definitive plan on what he's going to be doing. In fact, a guy came out with a plan, 11-point plan, which had problems with it. Some of the things that were in Rick Scott's 11-point plan, some of them were unconstitutional. They're just not going to happen. All right, let's get right into do this thing real quick. I'm allowed to be hard on the president. I'm allowed to be hard on any single employee of the United States government. They are all, every single one of them, working for the benefit of me, working for the benefit of you. That's the bottom line. They are all employees to you. All right, let's get into it. Senator Rick Scott wants to sunset Social Security Medicare. WAMC, Northeast Public Radio, by Michael Maripol, came out with this article April 15th, 2022 at 3:52 p.m. So this is a couple months ago, and now we're getting to see basically a lot of the reactions that are occurring with Rick Scott trying to cover his butt on this whole thing. All right, and there's a reason he's got to cover his butt. It's not, he didn't, there were some problems with the 11-point plan. By now, many listeners have probably seen Senator Rick Scott, a Republican of Florida, on television trying to deny what is in his infamous 11-point plan to rescue America. One example that he tries to deny is in the section on government. Buried on page 19 of the 31-page PDF of the plan is a very significant promise. Okay, page 19, 31-page PDF. So it's a small PDF. I believe it is worth the time and perhaps ways to discuss that will accompany this reading. Check out the 31-page PowerPoint of Scott's alleged rescue plan. You can access it here to read the plan itself. Click on the TV screen, and the entire sending of the PDF will show up. Anyway, so that's a little thing on the article. Bottom line is it's accessible online if you want to see his plan. All right, here's what people were upset about. I'll just skip the other part in here. Let's see. Okay, now among the many federal laws in the books, we're going back to the article, reading as if it was us, is a law called the Social Security Act. This law was originally passed in 1935 to create unemployment insurance, aid to dependent children, later extended to cover all poor single women with children, renamed aid to families with dependent children, blah, blah, blah. All of the programs in Social Security. Since then, the law has been amended many times and expanded dramatically. Okay, the law currently has 21 titles, and under each title are many sections. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. Included in the current law is an entire section covering Medicare, which is administered by the Social Security Administration. All right, so we already know all this stuff, right? All of your benefits, to some degree, funnel through the Social Security Administration. Let's skip the crappy fat on this piece of steak. So if Scott actually understood, and remember, this is highly biased. This is a highly biased writing. I'll read to you exactly what the wording is, and you can tell. So, right? So, wait, where is it? So, dash, dash. That's a little bit of bias here. Ready for the bias. So, if Scott actually understood his own personal proposal, the entire Social Security Act, including Medicare and Social Security pensions, almost all Americans over 70 are receiving monthly, would either disappear, that's what sunsetting means, by the way, or have to be reenacted by Congress. So naturally, a reporter asked Scott how he could justify sunsetting Medicare's Social Security pensions, programs that are wildly popular and have been in existence for decades. Scott dismissed that concern as Democrat talking points. The reporter retorted with a tone of exasperation in his voice, "No, it's in your plan." And of course, Scott was lying and the reporter was right. When I delivered this orally over the radio, this is what the writer of this article is saying. I went through Scott's language again. I reminded my audience that the word all referred to every piece of federal legislation, including the entire Social Security Act and its many amendments since 1935. All right, one thing this article doesn't do very well is it doesn't tell you what was in the 11 point that basically was so incredibly offensive to so many people. And that was the idea that after 5 years, right, we would essentially look at all the legislation and have to reenact it, right? So it wasn't one of these things where it just these things that we passed, that have no end date, they would just last forever. There would be a 5-year thing in there where basically we would look at it again to see if we wanted to pass it continuing forward. Now, that idea on its base fundamental at the lowest level, or you could say the highest level of law, would be unconstitutional. It would be unconstitutional because some laws are created to directly codify or, better define or simplify the specific wording of the Constitution that have become canon. And those, they can't really go anywhere. That's the bottom line. So you couldn't sunset those particular items. But the next layer down, you could potentially do this. And the idea behind it is that there's a lot of legislation on the books that's either wasting money or nobody's following it anymore, and we just need to cycle through and audit the whole system. That's what the point of this was. Rick Scott was saying we want to audit the system. Every 5 years, we look at legislation that's been passed. Right? That's what he's saying. All right. Now let's consider, we're going to go back to reading specifically what this guy said. Okay. Now let's consider Scott's assertion that if a law is worth keeping, like the Social Security Act, Congress can pass it again. Well, yes, Congress could pass the entire Social Security Act word for word again, but will they? Will they not hold hearings? Is there nothing in the current Social Security Act that some members of Congress might want to change or eliminate? Try and imagine the scenario when the entire Social Security Act needs to be reauthorized. So the writer makes a good point here, which is that, well, let me read between the lines here. Politicians are lazy, and politicians find scapegoats better than any other employment person on earth. Okay. If they don't want to actually do something, it will die in committee. If they don't want to have to interact with something, it'll go to their office and nothing will happen with it. And some deadline will occur, which will kill the thing. Politicians are inherently, usually lazy or smart about how they can kill something that's going to cost them something. Politicians want your vote without giving you anything extra. That's the game. How do they get as close to that as possible? All right, let's keep reading through this. Since the entire Social Security Act deals with taxing and spending, budget items, budget reconciliation could be used in the Senate to reauthorize the law, thereby avoiding the need to get 60 votes. But even getting 51 votes might not be all that easy. So the point he makes here is that that's true. If we had to look at all legislation pretty much every 5 years, these politicians, with the opportunity to take a lot of your retirement and disability benefits, could potentially go ahead and basically say, you know what, we're going to need some time with this thing. I don't think we're going to be able to pass it in time. Nobody's going to get their checks, blah, blah, blah. They could play the game to remove rights from the American people so that they get their retirement check. They could play the game. What's funny about this is that when people really think about it, the last thing we want to do is give politicians the ability to vote things in for us or change our benefits, which is ironic because then it kind of changes the whole scenario to why do we even have these politicians? Why don't we just vote? Use like a system, like a system that is based off a blockchain to all vote on legislation that we think is important to us. Have a voting app on our phone, right? Why don't we have that? Well, we don't have that. We have politicians that we don't trust. So that's what we've got right now. All right, let's keep reading from the thing. Republicans have always had it in for Medicare. When Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House in 1995, the Republican majority in both houses passed legislation that cut Medicare spending by $270 billion in order to finance $245 billion in tax cuts. There have been bills suggested to partially privatize Social Security pensions, that was the Bush era, and to transform Medicare into a government subsidy for individuals to buy private medical insurance. Let me make something clear. Some social programs we need, some social programs should be better than they already are. For example, retirement. Retirement should be more per month. Medicare should be across the board for everybody. And here's why. We want people to successfully complete school, successfully get a job, successfully work a job. They can't constantly be sick. That's the reality. Now, if you use a little bit of my brain and put it onto your plate, what you'll realize is that a lot of people that could be working jobs are not working jobs because they're in horrible situations. They don't know where they're going to live tomorrow. They don't know when their car's going to stop working, all those details. And all of that creates what's called insecurity. And that insecurity kills their ability to work. So if we have healthy people, we're getting closer to having stability, which allows people to work more. Let me give you an example. What is the number one thing that happens when you give couples more money? They have kids because they have become secure, because they have become stable. All right, let's keep reading. All right, and that's true. Republicans throughout history have not been a big advocate of Medicare. And the Bush era, when it came to, basically privatizing Social Security benefits, was insanity. It was so bad that the nonprofit on budget basically came out with articles that just beat them into the ground. They beat the Republicans into the ground on that one. And they were right to do so. We need a social program backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. Even though the United States government has found a way to not be able to back the retirement system with their full faith and credit, which is going to run out in part within the next 10 years. So, it's all going to plan. It's all great. Everything's good. Don't worry about it. All right, let's keep reading. When Gingrich tried to cut back Medicare in 1995, President Bill Clinton vetoed the Medicare cut and tax cut, embedded in two separate budget bills. Good job, Clinton. When its vetoes were upheld, Gingrich shut down the government twice. Ultimately, Clinton and the Republicans in Congress did reach a compromise that involved the abolition of the old AFDC program. The massive Medicare cut and tax cut plans were shelved. The compromise also involved promises to balance the federal budget, which actually occurred for 3 years, 1998 to 2001. A lot of you guys don't know, but the United States hasn't made money for a long time. It's been since Clinton. We've just been going in debt ever since then. Trump put us in debt. And Biden is putting us in debt a hell of a lot faster than Trump. So we are a debt country. Our credit card, it's made out of titanium because that's the only thing that can handle that many swipes. Let's keep going. More to the article, specifically from the article. By the way, the compromise on welfare was a disgusting piece of legislation. This is just more, this is him making, and look, I'm all for opinion pieces here, but I'll read it. I'll read it so you can see how biased it is. You can see how, and I like to read articles that are a little more balanced than that. This is not balanced. By the way, the compromise on welfare was a disgusting piece of legislation called the Personal Responsibility Act. For details, see Peter Edelman, The Worst Thing Bill Clinton Had Ever Done, Atlantic, March 1997, for the differences between what Clinton initially proposed and what ultimately passed. See Mirapol surrender, how the Clinton administration completed the Reagan Revolution. That's true. That was not his best legislation by far. Well, it was the evolution of what it became. That was the big issue. All right. Because Medicare, I'm reading from it. Because Medicare has been attacked repeatedly by Republicans, imagine what will be proposed if it sunsets and has to be reimagined and reauthorized by Congress. Now, I do agree that if Scott's plan were adopted, there would be a great deal of pressure on Congress not to mess with Medicare or any other part of the Social Security Act. However, previous efforts by Republicans make it clear that given a chance, they'd go after Medicare again. And there might be other sections of the Social Security Act that wouldn't sail through to reauthorization without a fight. But let's for a moment assume that something very similar to the current Social Security Act would pass again. In certain other situations, a law that was sunsetting would be allowed to disappear. The Affordable Care Act would not be reenacted if one house of Congress were to be controlled by Republicans. The SNAP program or Medicaid might have work requirements added, which it does in Florida. And the list of laws goes on and on. Please remember Scott's statement refers to all federal legislation. There are thousands of federal programs in existence, all of which would have to be reauthorized. The Environmental Protection Agency would have to be reimagined. The Clean Water Acts would have to be renegotiated in Congress. The entire tax system at the federal level would have to be reimagined and then renegotiated. Yada, yada, yada. Okay. All right. So here's the zero. Now let's consider Scott's assertion that if the law is worth keeping, like the Social Security Act, Congress can pass it again. Well, yes, Congress could pass the entire. we already went through it. All right. So if Scott's proposal were ever adopted, how would Congress ever have time to consider the problems of today? They'd be too busy deciding whether to reenact every law they had ever passed. If they wanted to reenact them, they would have to reimagine and renegotiate them. Obviously, the entire 11-point program is mostly hot air. Once again, this article is biased. Some of the points in there are excellent. But it does include some dangerous concrete proposals, including this one and the ones I've discussed in two previous commentaries. The dangerous concrete proposals must be exposed and countered. The fact that most of Scott's plan to rescue America's mindless boilerplate should not cause us to laugh it off. The concrete stuff is dangerous. All Republican candidates for Congress in the fall should be forced to either own them or repudiate them. All right. Obviously, an extreme left writer. If you go read it, and we can always do like a full, walkthrough on the 11 points, you'll see that some of the ideas are actually quite good. But here's the thing that gets everybody frothy, and this writer is correct about it. Making Congress revote on everything every so many years, right? You could change the year amount, would be moronic. And here's why. Congress is a two-party system that gives, I think, a little less than two shits about the American people, maybe just one shit. And as a result of that, having them renegotiate things means that you have enabled them to take the power to change those acts that were passed that actually support and help Americans, which we don't want to do because the politicians are lazy with the intent of being basically put into that chair that they've been sitting in all those years. We don't want to give them the power. The closer we get as a human race, as United States citizens, to be able to vote for the things that we want to vote on our phone, the better off we are. Really, the more educated we'll become on the issues that are prevalent, the more work that'll have to be put into defining what are the things that want to be passed, showing both sides. It'll be like a news channel where things are actually not super CNN or super Fox. But we're not like that. What we are is Republicans and Democrats. So taking the bias out of that article, what I conclude is that it is a terrible idea in the way that it is essentially written. As its doctrinal overall arching theme, it's a terrible idea in the sense of we can't allow politicians to be put in that power seat to renegotiate the things that we rely on. However, there's another side to this, which is very important and you need to focus on and think about here. There's a lot of laws out there that we either don't use or are abusive to the American people that we should reconsider, that are just going to cascade until something happens to change them. So, is Rick Scott going to inherently sunset Social Security benefits? No. Is Rick Scott going to inherently sunset retirement, disability, widows, disabled child, auxiliary benefits, or Medicare? No. He's gone against that and said that's not his plan, that's not his intention. But from his writing, right, from his initial 11-point writing, it would appear that he promoted the idea of having to revote things every 5 years, which, to be fair, it's an idea that makes sense for little legislation or problematic points. But then how do you pick which ones you're going to attack? How do you pick which ones you're going to go and actually renegotiate? And who do we have to renegotiate? Our politicians. How many of you trust the politicians in your state? I'm just asking a question. How many of you think the senators that represent you in your state actually know what you're going through? I'm just asking a question. How many of you think that the senators even understand how the basic fundamental programs work for the poor? I think some of them do, but I think the fine details, they have no clue at all. They have zero experience. A lot of these senators, they've never really even interacted with the poor, but for a couple of handshakes and handing out of food for the camera. So my point to you is this. The thing I would proffer is this. I would like to see Americans having the capacity to vote by phone, because you'd be amazed at what we could vote through. You'd be absolutely amazed. If you put somebody in a chair that could create the bills that you wanted passed, that would be step one. Step two, vote by phone. Guys, let the president have, commander in chief of the army. Let them handle, but think about the benefits you could pass for yourself. Think about the audits you could require of the United States government. I mean, look, if you were a CEO, would you ever allow your employees to go this long without an audit? Would you allow the company to just keep doing what it's doing? 5 trillion a year over what we earn, adding to our deficit, 500 billion in credit card debts. Whatchamacallit, it's the fee we have to pay. It's the interest charge, right? That's 500 billion in interest charge. My God. Like, is that even fathomable? Maybe. Anyways, guys, I'll catch you a little bit later. I hope all is well, and we'll catch you a little bit later. But I have another video coming out. I'm going to be doing, I think, one more video tonight, and then I have to do some law firm stuff. And then around 12 at night, I'm going to be going out to the barn and getting one of the stalls, the floor of it rather, to be totally reset. Big rubber mats on top. These horses are going to be living in luxury. I'll catch you a little bit later. Have a wonderful day, and we'll go from there. Thanks so much, guys. Bye-bye.